How would you describe Mahjong to someone who doesn't know what it is?
It's rummy with tiles.
I wrote it a very long time ago. I wrote it about 20 years ago. I think it was like a story that I always really wanted to tell about, about my mother and her friends and that whole group of women that I grew up around.
I actually took a handheld tape recorder and took it into the theater down the street in San Francisco 20 years ago and recorded the audio for the show.
We wanted it to be a time capsule of which this is. It's a 20-year-old show that she has revived, and she's carried it on to give to us now. And we're creating this time capsule to give to people later.
And I hope it comes out good. I hope it's a good performance next Sunday. In front of the live audience. That's going to be scary. It's kind of based on my mother's, my mother and her friends. And it's kind of like a character that's a combination of all of them.
So here we are with this wonderful crew, some learning, some expert, everything in between. And I was fortunate enough to be able to find people who were interested in the project just on the word of my saying I was impressed by this show 20 years ago.
Blanche, my mother's best friend. My mother played Mahjong. She played on the same night, at the same time, and with the same women for 25 years. She played on Tuesday nights at 8, and she played with Eleanor and Arlene and Diane. And sometimes Blanche played. But Blanche only played some of the time because she was the fifth. And in a Mahjong game, there's only 4 players, and the fifth only gets to play when one of the other players can't. So you might have wondered why, after all these years, Blanche never got her own game. But she never did. She only waited to play in someone else's game. What do you mean you didn't like the way I sounded on the phone? You know what? I don't always like the way you sound on the phone. You talk too loud, and it hurts my ears. The story meant a lot to me because I think that I thought a lot about my mother and her group of friends and how they really were such an incredible community of women with all their flaws. There's 4 women sitting around a Mahjong table, and it's their time. Why don't you go talk to the rabbi? Because maybe the problem isn't here, maybe it's here and here.
Interestingly enough, this performance seems to be exactly about my grandmother. My grandparents were Jewish immigrants, and I think what resonates mostly for me with the project is that my grandmother, I felt like, was dissatisfied with her life.
I think they had very nice lives, but I think in some ways their lives were hard, you know? I mean, they probably, they were stay-at-home moms, so they were probably always feeling a little bit less than. There was a whole world going on outside because it was the 60s, right? So it was this whole counter-revolution thing going on. They kind of just missed that, and they were like, well, now what do we do?
These were women whose lives really centered around the home, cooking, cleaning, shopping, and children. And not everybody was really into it. And then with Mahjong, they actually got to have their own friends. their own evening, their own time that really was separate from their family.
As I talk with people, I hear a lot of sense from both the league itself and also the individual players who don't want to be pigeonholed by this stereotype of what a Mahjong player was or is. And part of that is not wanting it to be seen as just a Jewish game, and that's, you know, out of a history of anti-Semitism. And part of it is also not wanting to be that suburban housewife, middle-class housewife, you know, fill in all the check marks.
Anyway, I have not thought about this in a very long time until my 16-year-old, the big macher, comes in and says to me, "Ma, what are you so afraid of?" I think they came with all the fears of their grandmother, you know, of their mothers. I don't know if that makes sense. And so that's some of what the piece is about, you know, about them being really scared about things and not really living life to the fullest.
My mother was a very different person than my grandmother, and I know they were really at odds throughout her life about she was going out into the world and doing stuff, and my grandmother was very apprehensive about what that meant.
When I think about my mother, who was first generation in the United States, you know, she was here, and if she was born when I was born, she wouldn't have been married with 2 children. Not my mother. Mahjong for her was a night that had nothing to do with taking care of somebody else.
My mother was not that different than her mother, but my sister and I are very different than my mother. So I thought that was the first generation that was true for.
There's a documentary aspect of just capturing the show, so we will have that show on film for all time, and I think that that's a valuable cultural document. However, where we want to go next is then to raise some financial support so we can go to the East Coast and film in Florida, film in upstate New York, and that's where we find the women who were the inspiration for the show. That's how we capture their lives.
I thought it was an interesting generation of women because for the most part, they're first generation. Their mothers came from Europe. A lot of their mothers came from the shtetls.
That generation meant a lot to me, and in the media, often when I was growing up, these women were pictured for their humor especially, which is wonderful, and I've learned and gained so much from that. But I felt there was a whole person to see with all these women.
And I think that the Jewish part of the history is important. Sisterhoods and Hadassah became a major way for people to learn Mahjong and to also feel like it's not just a leisure activity, I'm also fundraising for a cause. So all of those reasons make sense, and I think it's important to honor all the aspects of this history and the people who created it.
I think we started playing in about 1959. We moved into this garden apartment where a lot of us lived, and we got together and we formed a Mahjong game, 5 of us. We were mostly stay-at-home moms, so we were happy to get out for an evening and have a little entertainment.
5 of us, okay, there was Arlene, myself, Arlene, Martha, Myrna, Eleanor, and Diane. I'm still playing Mahjong. I'll probably play till the day I die. Take the set to the grave with me. But I enjoy it. I play with terrific people. They're lovely women, and we have a lot of laughs, and it's good. And I'm glad to play because I'm old now, and I needed to keep my mind going. It's a good thing for your mind. Because, you have to pick a hand, figure it out, bet on somebody, pay the money. So all these things are good when you get older to keep your mind going. So
you actually think it helps you?
Yeah. I can't swear to it, but I try hard.
And we laughed at ourselves. And that's Jewish New York humor. And I noticed that in Baltimore, where I live, they don't have that humor.
No.
So I have to be very careful with some of the people that I sit with, not to get to New York like.
Why did you nickname Arlene Zelda Herring?
Right? Because that's what she reminded me of.
Who was Zelda Herring?
It was just a fictitious character that I made up. Because remember, I was an actress. So I made that up, and that's what I called her. That's what she reminded me of. And if I couldn't kibitz her, there was nobody I could kibitz.
I actually answered to that name.
See? There you go.
Anything to keep peace.
See?
I vividly remember being in the little house in Queens, New York. We had this staircase with a little accordion door, and it was bedtime, and I slept in a little attic room, no bathroom upstairs, just a little attic room, and I would hide on the stairs in my little flannel pajamas, and I would listen to the ladies come in, and well, I would meet them when they came in, and then we had to go. It was out, you're out. And I would listen to the tiles.
So I think this is your first time being in a movie.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes. I mean, Warner Brothers called us, but we said no.
No, we knew we were waiting for you.